Hey guys, really quick before we get into the video, I just want to announce that my Discord server is up. If you'd like to come in and join the Discord, the link will be in the description of this video. Originally released as WiiWare titles, the first debuting in 2008, Lostwinds is a two-part series of puzzle platformers designed with the Wii's motion controls in mind. At a time when motion controls were relatively new and the market was quickly becoming saturated with shovelware and cheap gimmicks, it was easy for small, more obscure titles to slip under the radar. Sadly, I feel this was somewhat the fate of the Lostwinds games. Overshadowed by the Wii's virtual console library filled to the brim with glorious nostalgia, I don't think they ever got the attention they deserved. While the games have since been ported to the iOS in 2011 and the PC via Steam in 2016, making them accessible to a wider audience, they still lack the marketing to garner them much attention. While I originally beat the Wii versions, today I'm going to be looking at the 2016 PC releases as they have by far the widest reach. The series follows the story of Toku, a young boy, and Enril the Wind Spirit, who after a fated encounter set out on a journey to regain Enril's lost power and take down Balazar, a corrupted spirit who Enril had sealed away but eventually escaped. A simple story, but charmingly depicted in a stylized opening very akin to something from the Wind Waker or Okami, and enough to set the scene for our adventure. Lostwinds and its sequel Winter of the Melodias both play as 2D/puzzle-based platformers where Toku is controlled via the keyboard and Enril the mouse. While Toku's left and right movement is very basic, Enril can be used to jump, hover, manipulate objects in the environment, and even use special abilities to aid Toku in his adventure. It was perhaps one of the most interesting uses of motion controls I'd seen at the time, and one that translates onto the PC surprisingly well. You really feel like you're controlling two separate characters working in tandem with each other, which makes for a very fun and unique experience. While they're not overly complex, we are only given the mechanics in their most basic form, and the rest is left for us to figure out on our own. Not only does it make learning the various uses for Enril's power a very interactive experience, but it allows you to really sink into the gameplay without interruption. It really encourages you to play around with Enril to discover the different ways to manipulate objects within the environment. Even if it doesn't always affect the game, almost everything reacts to the wind in some way, and it really makes the small world feel alive. The puzzles aren't anything too difficult, but you will occasionally come across one that makes you pause for thought, either because the game wants you to use a skill in a new way, or the solution isn't as straightforward as it first appears. And while the first game's puzzles are mostly based around manipulating objects to open doors and passageways, the second game introduces a season swapping mechanic, which adds another layer to the gameplay, with certain areas or routes only being accessible in one season due to environmental obstacles. It's much more engaging and makes the act of backtracking through environments still a fresh experience. There is even a little combat in the game in the form of glorbs. Born from Balazar's corruption, they can take on several forms or elemental properties, each requiring a different strategy to defeat. However, none are particularly hard once you figure out the secret, and feel more as if they are there to encourage you to play around with Enril than to present any real danger. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. The games thrive off the fun of exploration rather than being especially difficult, and the enemies serve only to enhance that experience. Both games are incredibly gorgeous for the late 2000s. The stylized graphics are vibrant, yet the colours are soft, and the games as a whole feel very tranquil. So much detail is crammed onto screen at times, giving the environments real depth. You really do feel like you're exploring your way through a living world rather than a 2D one with pretty backdrops. The game knows how to make use of its foreground and background space so well, and it's often not just the busy areas that are the star. Just as breathtaking is climbing through caves and forests to emerge with a view of clear blue sky and beautiful rolling hills. Every place you go feels connected and intentional without feeling unnatural or manufactured. Coupled with a calming and folky soundtrack that is stunningly beautiful, the games have this sneaky ability to make you just lose yourself in their totally enchanting world. Replaying these games years later, none of that effect was lost. For short games, they seem to start a little bit slow, like they're going to be very hand-holding, but before you know it, they've given you a pat on the back and a nudge out of the door, and you've become completely wrapped up in your little adventure. Exploration is rewarded in the form of collectible statues you can find hidden in every area. While they don't really have a function in terms of affecting the game, they are a satisfying reward for that extra tricky jump or puzzle, a trophy for your curiosity. In fact, I think that's the sole reason I fell deeply in love with these games. They are set up to let your curiosity run wild and constantly rewarded. The longer I play them, the less they feel like games and more like little adventures of my own, and I think it's rare to find a series of games with such a simple premise be quite this captivating. It's almost like a little trip back to my childhood where I'd find myself going off the beaten path in a game just to see what I might find. A kind of pseudo-nostalgia, if you will, and it's fantastic. These aren't the kind of games you play to rush through. They're much better enjoyed at a relaxed pace just for the experience. If I had to describe them in one word, it would be charming. Every aspect of the games, from the music to the graphics to the controls, just fit together like an incredibly adorable jigsaw puzzle, and as a result are an absolute delight to play. That being said, no game is perfect, and while I personally adore these games, it wouldn't be fair to skip over the few issues they have. First and foremost, the games are very short. We're talking maybe 2 to 3 hours per game, depending on if you're going for the collectibles. And for that, I think the price tag per game is a little bit steep. While the experience is fantastic, it's over very quickly, and while I personally don't mind a short game if the quality is there, it might be worth waiting for a sale. I do also have a slight gripe with the controls. I think for what the game is trying to achieve, they are fantastic, but not perfect, and there are times where they just feel a little bit unresponsive. It was very rare and seemed to mostly affect one specific ability, the vortex, used to hover items in the air before gusting them back down to break objects or crush enemies. The problem was at its worst when I was casting it to the left. I couldn't get as clean of a motion moving my mouse towards my keyboard, and it would result in small moments of frustration where I was stuck for some time and my immersion was temporarily shattered. It's a shame because compared to the Wii version, they are overall much more responsive, and I just think they could have been fine-tuned to be a little bit more forgiving. However, looking at the games as a whole, they are little lost masterpieces. They hold up incredibly well for being about 10 years old, and are genuinely one of the most uniquely fun and immersive series of games I've played. Nearly every moment spent with Toku and Enril was a complete joy, and I can't help but feel a little gutted the series was left at just 2 entries. While I highly recommend experiencing both games back to back, if you do find yourself deciding between them, the second, Winter of the Melodias, is definitely more mechanically and visually interesting, and can be understood without having played the first. Regardless of how you experience them, there is nothing quite like becoming utterly absorbed on an adventure in another world, and that is clearly something the Lostwinds series understands, and as a result they are fantastic games to visit when you need that little pick-me-up. Hidden gems in both exploration and motion-based games, they just ooze charm, and I wholeheartedly recommend giving them a try. You never know, you might just find yourself totally blown away.